Theater? Or did you do it?
I haven't been to the show. I'm hot now.
Now you're hot.
Now I should say nothing. It's been a few years since I've been.
Okay.
So yes. You're not mic'd? Well,
You want to be mic'd?
You need to get
Do
mic'd.
you want this? You can have this. You need to be mic'd. We got to get you a mic then.
Why don't you get a mic?
Yeah, let me get a mic.
Hello. What?
I'm Kim.
Oh, hi Kim. How are you?
I'm good. I
Good.
have a friend.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. You got better nails than I do too.
She's got back scratchers there. Got an itch right there. Kim. It's okay. There you go. The temple.
Patrick's Day.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you should go to Boston for St. Patrick's Day.
See, I love it in Chicago. They actually celebrate St. Patrick's Day the weekend before and the weekend after.
Basically.
Basically.
Beer,
There's,
yeah.
It's another excuse to drink a lot.
Green beer.
Green beer, exactly.
Oh, we can start.
Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the adventure here at the KitchenAid Cooking Theater continues. Our next chef is also an editor, publisher, and radio TV personality known for his address Milk Street in Boston. That's where he is. Writes his magazine, and he has his own cooking school, and he also records his public television show and radio show under the Milk Street name. Best-selling author of Milk Street, The New Home Cooking. He is the guy with the bow tie. Please welcome Chef Christopher Kimball.
Thank you. I don't see, usually somebody wears a bow tie out there. This is Chicago, it's not Boston, so maybe that doesn't work. So just a little preface. We're going to do two recipes, a Thai coleslaw and a stir-fried ginger beef with rice noodles to sort of explain a little bit about what Milk Street is about. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. You know, a few years ago, my cooking changed. I stopped cooking the recipes I've been doing all my life, and I changed entirely. And I realized that American cooking was based primarily, traditionally, on Northern European cooking. And that's great, except that most of the rest of the world doesn't cook that way, right? So I went from the idea of taking bland ingredients like beef and potatoes, etc., and using time, heat, and experience and technique to develop flavor, to doing what they do in the rest of the world, which is they start with big flavor. So today we're going to use fish sauce, and we're going to use lime juice, and we're going to use ginger, and we're going to use chili garlic sauce and some other things. So when you start with big flavor, you end up with big flavor, and the cooking itself is less important. If you think of a stir fry, for example, which became very popular 50 years ago, it's mostly about the flavor you start with, and the cooking's very quick. So I did a little more research and found that the Ottoman Empire had 88 spices, right? And Northern Europe had salt and pepper, pretty much. A little nutmeg and cinnamon, maybe caraway. The North Africa had all the chilies, and there were no chilies in Northern Europe, obviously. The Far East has fermented sauces, soy sauce, fish sauce, oyster sauce. The Middle East has pomegranate molasses. So there are a lot of other, and the rest of the world use handfuls of herbs. This is Matt Card, by the way, my food editor at Milk Street. We hired him for many reasons, but his hair is a really good reason. He's got terrific hair. Really upsets me. So I used to have great hair, but
I'm sure you did.
Many
Long
hair, very long hair, and I drove around the country following the Grateful Dead, but that's another time. It just turns out the rest of the world also use handfuls of herbs. I started seeing recipes with like 2 cups of cilantro or a cup of mint, or 2 cups of parsley, tabbouleh, for example. So the idea of herbs and chilies and sauces and spices makes it really easy to cook, And so all of a sudden, in half the time, I was getting better food. And so our objective is to go around the world. We were just in Senegal, we're just in Tokyo, we're just in Taipei, we're just in Madrid, cooking with home cooks, not restaurant cooks, home cooks, to take really simple recipes. Indian cooking, for example, came mostly from northern India, and it was mostly restaurant cooking. But if you look at the rest of India, Southeast India, Southwest India, go in the south, the recipes are really easy. They're very simple. So the rest of the world has simple recipes, they have big flavors, and the cooking itself isn't that complicated. So that sounded to me like a pretty good reason to start Milk Street, which is simpler food but bigger flavors. So, with that long introduction in mind, Matt.
Let's start cooking. So our first recipe today is going to be a Vietnamese ginger beef with rice noodles. And this is the Milk Street version of bun, which is a very common dish. And it's really about the rice noodles and the herbs. And in this dish, we're using the herbs really as almost like a salad mixed into the noodles. So as you were saying, it's handfuls of herbs instead of little bits. So we're going to start the dish by quickly marinating some beef to go on top of our noodles. The cut we're going to use here is sirloin tips, very strong flavor, cheap, and a little goes a long way. For this entire dish, for 4 servings, we're going to use about a pound. And we're going to pound those tips out to start. And what that does is it increases the surface area, so it cooks faster, but it's also a way to get flavor into the meat faster. You're going to break down the fibers a little bit, so it absorbs the flavors. So let me go ahead and pound that.
So why don't we call it bang bang beef?
Yeah, like
bang
bang chicken.
Yeah.
Well, that certainly works. So we're just after a weekend with you, this is feeling good.
Actually, Matt likes to pound all of his food before he cooks it, so.
Working with you, Chris. Working with you.
Always a pleasure.
Why do we pound it? Well, it does 2 things. It's going to cook faster, and then it also opens up the meat fibers. So we're going to put a quick marinade on here. That's ginger, fish sauce, a little bit of sugar, salt, and pepper. And it's only going to take about 15 minutes to help flavor that meat.
You know the recipe bang bang chicken? It's the same thing. The meat fibers get opened up, the flavor gets inside. Most marinating doesn't work. If you marinate something and then look at it later and cut it into it, the marinade only gets about a 1/4 inch into the meat, so it doesn't really do much. A salty marinade, however, if you have soy sauce or fish sauce or salt, the salt will get inside. But if the marinade doesn't have salt, it can sit there for hours and it's never going to get into the turkey or the chicken or the beef. So this helps. Thin cuts will absorb, thicker cuts won't.
So again, it's a pound of sirloin tips. If you can't find sirloin tips, tri-tip works great, or a flank steak. Any cut that's pretty lean with really big flavor. Now, ginger can be a real pain to peel, and I taught you a trick.
You did?
I did. A spoon. A spoon is the best tool you can use for peeling ginger. You just use the bowl and scrape away.
See, I actually learned something from Matt.
Wow.
After all these years, I learned how to peel ginger.
I'm here.
I've
for
learned
something.
a lot more.
Compliments few and far between with you.
This actually is, I just did this 3 or 4 months ago for the first time. It is amazingly easy to do.
And that's it. So I'm going to leave a little at the end, and then I'm going to grate it. And there's all sorts of different ginger graters. Everybody has their favorite. I like using a fine-toothed rasp-style grater. And the interesting thing about this dish is we're going to divide the ginger. One of the things we do a lot of at Milk Street is using flavors in multiple ways in the same recipe. Like if we're going to use lemon, we make sure to use lemon zest and the lemon peel and try and build the flavors, build levels of flavor rather than just a one-dimensional flavor. Did you get your cocktail while you stand there watching?
Cocktail? I had too many cocktails last night. Yeah.
Ooh, that's true.
Anyone go to the Henkel's party? There was a lot of cocktails. And
It gets a little slippery if you peel the whole thing, so that's why I said you can leave a little of the skin at the very end. And that's it. So we have about 2 tablespoons of ginger there. We're going to take half of that and we're going to put it with about a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of fish sauce, and a couple teaspoons of brown sugar.
You know, when we say fish sauce, I know a lot of people go, well, I'm going to cross that recipe off my list. Fish sauce is nothing more than anchovies and salt, and they put them in a barrel for a year, and then they come back, but they have a first press. They have the stuff at the bottom, And that's in the Far East, in Vietnam, for example, there are 3 or 4 levels of quality. Some is used for cooking, some is used for drizzling. But the stuff that comes out at the bottom first isn't fishy. It has umami, it has a flavor enhancing effect. And so if you get a good fish sauce, Red Boat makes a pretty good one in supermarkets, it's not going to taste fishy, it's just going to give you a lot of extra flavor. And also when you use a teaspoon or 2 or whatever in a recipe, you're not going to taste fish. The lower qualities will be fishier, but the high quality stuff, and you could also get really premium brands, is not going to taste fishy.
So I'm going to coat that in that rub, give it a couple turns to make sure the meat's fully covered. And that's it. We're going to let it sit at 15 minutes for room temp. And that ginger really has a lot of enzymatic actions. It's going to help pull in the flavor. And while that's sitting, we can go ahead and prepare our sauce for our dish. And that's going to be lime juice, more brown sugar. Again, it looks like a lot of ingredients, but they're duplicated. The rest of that ginger, more fish sauce, a little bit of chili sauce. This isn't a hot dish. Just a little bit of heat to help balance things out. There's a fair amount of sweetness.
That's what Matt always says, by the way. It's not too hot. Right?
We're training you, Chris. It's all about training, right? So again, it's about 15 minutes for the beef, and then we're going to sear it, and we're going to go ahead and soak our noodles. Now we're using rice noodles, which are, one of the things I love about rice noodles is there's no boiling, you're just soaking them. If you boil them, they're going to turn to mush. So it's really a great solution for very quick Tuesday night meals. So I'm going to turn that off and dunk my noodles. You can get rice noodles in all sorts of different thicknesses. For this dish, really like thin ones.
Does anybody have questions while we're doing this? Yes.
Now, like, if I needed to substitute for fish sauce, what can I do?
For fish sauce?
Yeah.
I just use soy sauce or oyster sauce would be fine. Yeah. But you should be able to get fish sauce. You're looking at me like I don't think so. But anyway, you should be able to get it almost anywhere. I live in a town of 930, so I live in a much bigger town than you do. So we're twice your size.
You know what you can also do? You can probably get anchovies. If you do soy sauce with an anchovy or 2, just mixed into that soy, it helps sort of replicate that flavor. So these take 3 to 5 minutes. You know, packages vary, so keep track of what the package says and keep checking them.
I don't know about your town, but we have a country store. Actually, my house is right next to it. And things are so bad at the country store that they use napkins for coffee filters. There's only one size cup, it's large. They don't have tops for the cups. And the cat sits on the cheese counter all the time. So that's basically our country store. So
Furry cheese?
yeah, that's furry cheese. Yeah. Yeah.
So while the noodles are soaking, I'm going to go ahead and start the slaw we're going to work on. Now, this is one of the first recipes we did for Milk Street, and it was based off, there's a chef in San Antonio, Quayle? Quayle?
Quayley's, yeah.
Quayle Watson.
Quayle Watson, yeah.
And he does amazing things. He'll take traditional Texas dishes and mash them up with southeastern flavors. And it was really inspiring. It was inspiring the way the sort of phase shift he made from the mayonnaise to coconut milk. So this is our rendition of something he did. So it looks all the part like a classic coleslaw, but it's coconut milk based instead of mayonnaise. So the flavors are cleaner and lighter and brighter. So I'm going to go ahead and start the dressing for that. And it's serrano chilies, which is part of the base. And one of the things we do a lot with dressings and vinaigrettes is we try and sort of cook those strong flavors, be it garlic or chilies. About 10 minutes in the acid really helps soften the texture of those and soften the flavor. So you get a more developed blended flavor, and you're not going to bite into really harsh bits of garlic or chili or that sort of thing. something else we do a lot of is actually just grate the garlic. If you have a rasp style grater, just grate it into sauces. You can add a little at the end of a sauce.
Could I say a word about grating garlic? If you like your fingers, yeah, he likes to grate garlic, but unless you have really big garlic cloves, it's a little dicey. But anyway, okay. Just crush it. What?
All right, Mr. Lazy. So we're going to go ahead and cook the serrano for a little bit. We're going to add our sugar, and again, fish sauce. So, this is a great. The two dishes go very well together because you're using the same ingredients, but you're getting very different flavors from the dish. Yes.
Why are you using white sugar and brown sugar?
Repeat the question so that people can hear.
The question is, why are you using white sugar here? Somebody's paying attention. Somebody didn't go to the Henkel's party.
Because I don't do white sugar, but I can use brown sugar.
Brown sugar's great.
That'd be
too.
fine.
Totally good. I think for the coleslaw, we like the slightly cleaner flavor of it because with the cabbage and the radish, you get slightly mustardy tones to the salad. So the white sugar is nice. Use brown sugar. Totally good.
By the way, there's in baking, we just tested muscovado. We tested palm sugar. White sugar is like white flour. It has no flavor. And if you start baking and cooking with darker sugars that have like palm sugar or they have a lot of flavor. And we found you could substitute, in most cases, you could substitute those more flavorful sugars.
You can, if you can find palm sugar.
That's really great. Palm sugar is terrific.
One of my favorites. One of my favorite things about palm sugar is the viscosity to it. If you add it to oatmeal or meat glazes, if you're grilling, it's hard to beat palm sugar. So, well, you're golden. You're totally golden.
I use it in my peanut and my cheesecake.
Oh, wow.
That's a good idea.
That must be delicious. All right.
Maybe she works at Milk Street and we just don't know it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, so when you say you're cooking it, you mean you're putting sugar in with the chilies, or what?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. So when I said I'm air quotes, cooking the chili, what I mean is using the acid the acid will break down. Oh, lime juice. I didn't mention the lime juice that I put in while Chris was yapping.
That's the
away.
cooking. And you could do that same thing with onions, for example, for 15 minutes to take the bite out. Yeah, same thing.
It's great for vinaigrettes. It really helps mellow the garlic or the chili or the onion or the shallots. Pretty much any of our vinaigrette recipes start out the same way. But when you do that, you want to make sure it's just the onions or garlic or chilies and not, don't put any fat in there because that'll prevent the onions from cooking down. So we're going to wait before adding the coconut milk. And again, that's sugar, serrano, lime juice, fish sauce. Napa cabbage is one of my favorites. It's got a very crisp texture, flavor. It's got a slight mustardy quality to it. And it couldn't be easier to work with, which also makes it one of my favorites. So you just cut it crosswise, or have it lengthwise and then pull off the outer leaves. And don't dribble. I tend to take the top off because that can get a little browned and mushy. And then you just cut crosswise. Nice, perfect ribbons. This is actually, it's a nikiri. It's a Japanese-style veggie cleaver, and it's one of my favorite kitchen tools. And I love them for home cooks because they're very safe. There's good depth to the blade. They can have a little rock, so you can still do sort of a mince chop. They work great for scooping. You can use the front of the blade almost like a shovel to lift up instead of using the side, using the blade, which everybody tells you not to do because it'll dull the blade.
Are you going to get to the paid commercial announcement about the knife, or are you just going to not tell anybody? Here, I'll do it because that's what I do.
Oh, that is what you do.
This is, actually we designed with Henkel's. It'll be out shortly. And we're also doing a 4-inch Chinese vegetable cleaver. But the cleavers, when I first learned to use them a while ago, the other thing about them that's really nice is the deeper blade is safer when you put your knuckles up against it. And it's also easier to use. A lot of 10-ounce, really big chef's knives, if you're a good cook, they're fine. But for people who are less apt with a knife, these are really easy to use. By the way, I did a survey of home cooks. I mentioned this yesterday, but at Milk Street, we had them come in, and 70% of them said they never have sharpened their knives ever. So we also make a long serrated knife, which will work. But the point is that sometimes we find people at home the way they use cookware or tools is very different than what manufacturers think. So in this case, this is a great knife. And by the way, also, a lot of people, when you watch them cut, they sort of saw back and forth. You know, it's a slice through. Everything's a slice through. And this little blade, the way it's done that way, does a really nice job.
You could keep.
Would you like me to do it? No. Everybody has to have a job, man.
Everybody does have to have a job. So slicing the cabbage really couldn't be easier, and that's it. It's about half a cabbage for this recipe.
Any other questions while we're standing here? Yeah.
Did you name your new show and venture Milk Street after Milk Street in Boston?
After what do we mean, Milk Street in Boston?
Well, in other words, there's a street in Boston in the
Oh yeah, we're on. Our address is 177 Milk Street. That just shows how creative and smart we are. we sat around for months going like, what should we call it? And my wife actually, who's the co-founder of Milk Street, said, well, we should just call it Milk Street. And I said, that sounds like Sesame Street. She said, yeah, well, that's okay. So it's called Milk Street for that reason. Yeah, we're on 177 Milk Street, which is right at the end of Milk Street, right across from the aquarium. Actually, Ben Franklin was born on Milk Street. So.
Really?
Yeah. And our building is the old custom house, and then it turned into the grain and flour exchange in the 1880s or 90s. It's a great building. It has huge high ceilings. We have a private entrance. It's a great spot. You know, it's nice.
And we have brick and mortar cooking classes there, which are fantastic. If anybody's in Boston, I really encourage coming through. So to the Napa cabbage, we're going to mix in a couple more vegetables. We're going to mix in red radish. If you have daikon, that works really well too. Brings a nice mustardy flavor to it, and also you get a nice crispness, which keeps contrasting. One of the things that's really important to me as the food editor at the magazine is texture in our food, because it really helps keep things interesting. So we always try and add contrast, be it crunchy, chewy, slippery. I love fuchsia Dunlop, the shui shui, crispy yet.
Well, in Chinese cooking, as you know, like chicken feet is a delicacy because they like the texture. So I don't think, in America, there are two things you don't see. You don't see bitter as a flavor, sometimes in Southern cooking, but bitter is a really important flavor sometimes. You don't see a combination of sweet, sour, salty, savory together. You almost always see some sort of sweetener, most places around the world, from a tagine to Japan. I think those are the two, yeah.
Bitter's super important in dishes because it helps finish the dish, right? So it sort of shuts down your palate. So that's why like nuts as a final garnish are really nice, because then each bite of the dish comes out fresh. With the radishes and the sugar snap peas, which we're going to finish the dish, if you're uncomfortable with fine slicing, you can go ahead and use a mandolin. That's why those restaurant dishes are always so pretty.
Have you ever noticed, if you ever, with an open kitchen at a restaurant, you see someone with a little mandolin and they never use the guard? I was at a friend's restaurant in New York once, and I was sitting right next to the kitchen, and the guy was, for half an hour, was doing turnips or something, and he had, one of those $10, cheap, and he kept going like this, and he got down to this far from the blade, and I couldn't eat anything until he moved on and did something else. I almost had a heart attack. So I used to do the CBS morning show when Harry Smith, who's terrific, was the host. And after it was someone else was doing a segment with him with a mandolin, he ended up in the hospital with 11 stitches. So on morning television. So
makes good TV.
It was very exciting TV. So I strongly suggest you always use the guard. And by the way, the a really inexpensive mandolin, like Ben Rinner's one we like, but you don't need the big fancy stuff. Something very simple, fits in a drawer, does a nice job, easy to clean.
So with these sugar snap peas, I'm cutting them on a bias, which adds, it makes it pretty. Everything looks better on a bias, including you.
Should I be tilted?
Yes. But it does something else. It exposes more surface area, so the sugar snap peas better absorb the flavor of the dressing. I worked in restaurants a very long time ago, and we used to have contests who could bias cut scallions the finest. Whoever lost.
Gee, Matt, that really sounds exciting. Is that?
Well, it was for the bar tab, so.
Oh, that's exciting.
That is exciting.
I'll give one more commercial announcement to shut up while I'm here. But you probably know we've worked with Kuhn Recon now for about a year. You can stop by their booth if you like to do some tools. And I really like working with them. I went over to Switzerland a year ago and we spent a few days with their designers. One of the things we really like, Matt does everything with tongs.
It's true.
I'm surprised you're not using tongs now. But what we did is design them. They're very thin at the end. They're scalloped. They're slightly curved inwards. It's easy to open and close. But a lot of tongs are, when you pick something up that's delicate, it breaks or hurts it. This is it's a really good job, so you can do some very delicate work and turn. And Matt's happy now because he has the perfect tongs, which...
I do.
Yeah, and the perfect knife. You're all set anyway.
I can sleep at night.
Yes.
You have a lot of questions, which is great.
If you're first setting up a kitchen, my daughter's getting a new apartment, what would be the 5 tools that you would need to start your kitchen off?
Tongs.
Yeah, maybe. Well, how about a skillet first, Matt? I think probably a 12-inch skillet, at least 3-ply. I would get a 3 or 4 quart saucepan. I would buy an inexpensive carbon steel 10-inch skillet, which we love as a sort of a nonstick. I'm not a big fan of nonstick in general, so carbon steel, if you season it properly, actually is terrific. I do it with eggs every Saturday, Sunday morning. I would get one really great knife, all-purpose knife, probably an 8-inch on a lighter side. I use that knife as my all-purpose knife now. That would be important. I think an instant-read thermometer would be crucial. A cheap stock pot, you don't have to buy an expensive one, that has a steamer insert. And there's lots of other things for baking, but for top of the stove. And tongs, of course.
And tongs.
Those would be sort of the key things.
Cutting board.
Yeah, cutting board, yes, that would be key, yes.
Duh.
Yes. Well, she said 5 things. I mean, I ran out of things. But yeah, those would be, the thing is you can cook really well with just a few things. I mean, Julia Child, had a very old-fashioned kitchen that was about 600 square feet total. And her husband, she had her pots and pans on the wall and a white pegboard, and Paul drew a magic marker around them. It was very old-fashioned. She didn't use a lot of different equipment. Sorry, I want to cook. She didn't use a lot of equipment, so you don't necessarily need a lot of different things. Sometimes it's nice, but...
So I picked what my wife would call a difficult bowl. Anybody else have that?
My wife would call it a stupid bowl. Yeah.
Well, we're a little more kind.
You haven't been married as long, that's why. It'll become a stupid bowl in about 5 years. There's nothing worse than tossing in a,
Yeah, well, we're almost there. So, again, we have Napa cabbage, thin sliced radish, the sugar snap peas. Now we're going to finish it with handfuls of cilantro and mint. And if you can't find mint, I know mint can be difficult to find out of season, unless it's actually taking over your yard. Does anybody else have mint taking over their yet?
It's a weed, yes.
It is, but it's the most commonly used herb in the world. Did you know?
Did you just make that up, or is that?
No,
is that
it's
true?
It's true. So in the salad, we're adding a half cup of each of cilantro and mint. With the cilantro, feel free to use the stems. I think a lot of people pick too much of the stem off cilantro, and it's really packed with flavor. In a lot of Asian cooking, they're using the roots, too, to form the base for curries. When I'm chopping herbs, loose herbs like mint, I like balling it up into a little tight ball, holding it down and sort of pinching it, and curling my fingers back, and just cutting through. Mint browns pretty easily, so you do want to hold off on cutting it until just before serving. And cilantro. So I'm just going to grab a bunch, leave some of the stems behind. And I'll save those stems. I'll use the stems for making rice pilaf or something like that. You can puree them with the cooking water. And again, it's just ball it up and cross cut. Always using that pinch grip. Keep those knuckles back. And it doesn't have to be exact. Herbs, they look great any way you cut them.
Well, you know, if you remember the Mastering the Art of French Cooking, or when I started learning to cook in the 60s and 70s, all the diced onion had to be just right. A brunoise is 1/2 inch and a small dice. You never have to do that again. It just doesn't matter. You're not Jacques Pepin, you're not working in a restaurant. It just doesn't matter. Once in a while, if you're using a diced onion in a dressing of some kind, sure. But if you're going to cook the onions, it just doesn't matter. They'll break down anyway. So when we do onions, it's more of a rough chop. You know, if you go to any other place in the world outside of France, probably, or Northern Europe, nobody sits there and perfectly dices anything. So you really don't have to worry about it. It's really easy to do. And it's just 2 cuts. You know, you make cuts this way and cuts this way. You don't have to make that other cut, which is also safer, especially if you don't ever sharpen your knives, which is very dangerous.
Or, you know, one thing to do if you're making a sauce, like a pasta sauce, or cooking vegetables down for soup, you can always grate them. You can take out the box grater and just grate them. So I added coconut milk to that dressing to finish it, and it's very light. It doesn't take that much dressing to dress this coleslaw, because the cabbage breaks down pretty quickly.
Is this going to be enough to serve everybody?
Small bites.
We were just told to shut up because that was not. That's an awful suggestion, yes. Well, that's not quite what you said.
Coconut milk,
you
5
were
tablespoons.
polite. Yeah.
So again, I picked the difficult bowl, but we're almost there. So I'll platter some here. It's very light, it's crisp. It has Southeast Asian flavors, but you know, it doesn't come across that way. And I put this, you know, I serve it with all sorts of dishes in the summer. It's great on sandwiches, tofu sandwiches. And the final touch, you know, I talked about nuts, the bitterness of the nuts, and here we're gonna add a few cashews, which add crunch and a little sweetness and a little more fat. And those you don't even have to chop. I just sort of crush them in my hands.
Turn that down for you.
Thank you. And there we go. There's the slaw, and now we're going to sear the steak.
Can we get some applause for Matt for the slaw?
Thank you.
That is one of our favorite dishes.
Okay, so for our steak now, we're going to use a little peanut oil. We're going to use a little...
Peanut oil?
Did I
Okay, it's
lose my-
coming.
I think I may have misplaced it. Any questions?
Any other
in the
questions
interim?
while we're waiting for peanut oil?
This was from way before on the slaw. I was wondering, you're using the fresh sugar snap peas. Do you ever blanch them first?
No.
No.
Sugar snap peas are great. I love them. Super sweet, very neutral flavor, great texture. It's a staple in my house because I mean, they're fantastic in any sort of salad or thrown into pasta at the end for a little extra texture. And my kids just eat them hand over fist. Thank you. So it just takes a little, and we're clearly ready to go.
It's hot.
And the steak is so thin, it's going to cook. It's only about 3 minutes per side. With a salad like this, you want to make sure to not overcook the meat. Like medium rare is perfect, especially for sirloin tips or flank. Or with the magazine, we tend to aim towards really full flavored meats. I love skirt steak because it packs a lot of flavor in a small package, and a little goes a long way.
I would check it quickly because it's pretty hot.
You had a question over there.
Well, if you're Jose Andres, there are no 2 cultures you wouldn't put together because he's done just about Peruvian and Chinese, for example. That's a good question.
What wouldn't I miss?
What 2 cultures, cuisines, would you not put together? Well, actually, there was a book that came out recently that I thought was interesting. It was Southern Indian cooking, Goan cuisine, with the cooking of New Orleans.
Oh.
So you had sort of a Indian chicken dish with waffles on top. So I thought that was kind of odd. It was interesting, but it was That was a
Waffle
bit of a
vindaloo.
stretch. It was a bit of a stretch.
I like the idea of waffle vindaloo. I actually had fantastic Indian at a sandwich shop in New Orleans. That was, anybody ever heard of a place, Turkey and the Wolf? No?
Someone does right back there.
If you go to New Orleans, go. It's transformative. Actually, the best dish I've had in the past 2 years was a cabbage salad there. Clearly, I like my cabbage. Theirs was like unbelievable. It had pig's ears in it too, which kind of helped. Little bits of crisp texture. Again, keep coming back to the texture and the bitter and the sweet and balancing everything.
Well, actually, to answer your question, probably the two that have been put together that are the worst are English and Indian. Like tikka masala. Yeah, pour some tomato soup over it and call it tikka masala, yeah.
So we don't need a ton of browning on the meat. There's enough flavor there from the fish sauce, a little bit of sugar, and the ginger. The ginger really permeates the meat well. The old finger test.
Any other questions while we're waiting for the finger test?
Is the steak recipe in one of your books, or?
Is this recipe in one of our books? Yes. Is it in Tuesday night?
It's in our book coming out in September,
Yeah.
but it's available on the website.
It's called Tuesday Night Recipe. You can come to our website, 177 Milk Street, and the recipes, you can find the recipe there. Anybody else while we're waiting? Yes.
Where can we find the coleslaw recipe too?
The coleslaw recipe is in our first book, the Milk Street Cookbook. And it's online at 177milkstreet.com. Yeah. There was another question there, I think.
On the fish sauce, besides just brands, is there anything on the label which will identify it as bottom of the barrel? So
It should have salt and anchovies,
and that's it.
and that's it. Yeah, if anything else, you don't want to see anything else in there. That's all it is, salt and anchovies. Yeah.
I think Red Boat does have different grades at this point too. So it's worth reading the labels though.
There are a lot of really soy sauce, mirin, fish sauce, all those things. There are really high quality brands you don't really see in the supermarket. You can get wherever, but that makes a big difference. Get a great soy sauce or shoyu or fish sauce. It makes a big difference. If you buy I won't mention brands, but the brands you probably know in the supermarket, sometimes those are not great.
So, as we all know, super important to let your meat rest after cooking. For this recipe, the steaks are so thin, about 5 minutes is okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish the dish now. The rice noodles we've drained in cold water and rinsed and made sure they're really dry. I'm gonna add those to a mixing bowl. Again, what my wife would call difficult. And we're gonna remix that sauce we made earlier. Just gonna use my tongs there. Well, they work perfectly. If you've ever worked in a restaurant, you get used to using tongs as an extension of your hand.
One thing you don't know about Matt is he used to be a bike messenger. I like it in a bicycle messenger. And you probably use tongs there too, I would guess, probably.
No.
Any other questions while we're waiting? Anybody else?
So I'm gonna add about half of that sauce. We're gonna leave some as a just dipping sauce for serving. And then we're gonna have, it's more mint and more cilantro. In this case, about a cup of each. And here I'm just gonna pile them all up together and grab a knife. And just leave them really coarse so they don't disappear into the noodles. I'm gonna add those. And in this case, we're gonna use peanuts for the crunch, and peanuts are super common in Vietnamese cooking. And you can either chop them or just use the side of a knife and give them a few whacks. Or if you don't want to use a knife, the bottom of a small frying pan is good too. Toss those in. Give it a stir here. Hey, kitchen. Sorry, the aside. Could I get a white shallow serving platter? I use mine for. Thank you. I know, it's fantastic. So we've tossed the noodles, and you know, this is great. This is just a great pasta salad. You don't have to have the beef here. If you want to add scallops or shrimp or tofu, tofu is great. I mean, you could use the same marinade on the tofu and brown it. Something we've done for other recipes is adding a little turmeric as a coating because it crisps. Oh, that's beautiful. This one. Sorry, the turmeric helps crisp like cornstarch, so it's great on tofu.
Matt sometimes doesn't know you crossed the line. You just mentioned the pig's ears really made that dish in New Orleans.
And then I crossed to.
Yeah, okay, that was.
It's all delicious. There may have been tofu in that dish too.
We just made this. We just finished filming our fall season of the TV show Friday, and we just made that dish last week, and it was fabulous.
So I'm going to plate most of it there. And I'm going to go ahead and slice the beef. It's a little early, but I think we're going to be okay. Clean off my board a little. And my knife. Thank you. So with beef for a salad like this, I really try and slice it as thinly as possible. And you don't want to saw back and forth with the knife. You actually want to make sure you use the whole length of the blade for nice, clean slices. And again, you can use the front of that nigiri as sort of a scoop or a shovel to lift it up. And just scatter it.
Does look good.
Oop. Sorry, I missed that end there. I can hear the hunger out there. Add a few more peanuts to the top as a garnish, and the rest of my sauce went away. So, there we have it. 2 dishes with, they work great together.
Nice job. Do I get to have that for lunch?
You do.
Oh, probably not. Someone's gonna. I would like to thank a few people before we take some more questions at the show. We've worked with 5 companies now. I've mentioned Kuhn Recon, terrific people, a series of tools. Henkel's, Swilling Henkel's, we have 3 knives out, 2 more under development. Regalware as well, we have a line coming out, 5-ply late this summer. Michi Home, and we have some storage items, tabletop, and then KAF, we like KAF a lot. These are KAF aprons, actually.
They keep us clean.
And we're working on a line of things with them as well, so I just want to thank them for being just really great partners. Any last questions? Anyone? Yeah.
Cilantro, why does it taste like soap? And can you use something else?
Genetic and dill.
It's genetic. Some people genetically make it taste like soap.
Depending on the dish. I was going to say that with the salad. If you don't like the mint or the cilantro, dill is great. Dill, parsley. They use, regions of Vietnam use a lot of dill, and it's fantastic here.
In your dishes, what happens if you have a nut allergy? What can you replace that with? Because you can't use a peanut if you have a nut allergy.
You can't.
Don't say pig's ear.
And don't say pig's ear.
But it's so good. That's a good question. For a dish like this, you know, what I use a lot for texture is breadcrumbs. Like panko, you can fry them crisp, that sort of thing. And they have, if you brown them well enough, they have a little of that bitterness to finish the dish.
Matt, you have to give them the 6-minute crouton recipe. Come on.
No. During filming, they made me a Crouton King crown because I
Well, just explain how you do it, because it's a great recipe, actually.
Oh, anybody collects stale bread, like you end up with your bread box full of, you know, bits of baguette and everything else. So don't throw it out. Save that stuff, no matter how rock hard it is. Save it, put it in a bowl of hot water, and once it's soft enough, squeeze it out. Just squeeze it out over a strainer to catch the crumbs. Take those crumbs, spread them on a baking sheet, oil them, good extra virgin olive oil, ton of salt, pepper, and put them in a 400-degree oven. And about every 10 minutes, stir it, and they're amazing because what you end up with is like very crisp exterior and very sort of custardy interior. And great way to use leftover bread.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Another round of applause again. You can see more at 177milkstreet.com. You can follow him on Facebook at CPK Milk Street and Twitter, CP Kimball, and Instagram 177 Milk Street. That way you can see not only the magazine, not only information about